Hello everyone, thanks for joining this or another Satchel Pulse webinar. My name is Jon Tait. I am a Deputy CEO and Director of School Improvement, and I'm going to be talking to you today about one of the really key pillars for wellbeing that Satchel have produced, which is job satisfaction. So a little kind of introduction to begin with, which hopefully doesn't need a lot of explaining of why this is really important. And I think that certainly in today's climate of financial issues, with increased workload and well-being being on our agenda, it's so important to make sure that as school leaders, we do everything we can to make sure that our staff feel that real satisfaction in their jobs. We know that that's a lot of time why people come into the profession. They come in because it's a real vocation, but we've got to make sure that we don't just rely on that and kind of fall back on that and think, well, people come into this because they want to. We've got to make sure that throughout this time and throughout all of our times in all of our schools, we do everything we possibly can to make sure that our staff really feel valued, they feel like their work is being appreciated, and they have that real job satisfaction, as it says on the tin, really, of the wellbeing pillar, to make sure that they are happy in what they're doing, they can see their career progressing, and that they're actually improving both personally and professionally as human beings. I think that's really, really important for us to kind of take stock of, to reflect on, and to think about the things that you are or you are not doing to address that. And it's very, very easy as leaders throughout our times, throughout our days, throughout our weeks, throughout the term, to get lost on the treadmill of kind of life and forget about what's really important. And for me, what's really important is we've got to look after our staff. We've got to make sure that we need to make sure that they are the best that they can be if we want them to make our students the best that they can possibly be. And it has to be starting with, how do we look after our staff? How do we make sure that we develop them? How do we make sure that they feel really satisfied in that their work that they're doing, that it's having an impact, that it's being noticed, that it's having those real kind of measurable kind of impacts on human beings and young people, but also on themselves as a professional and as a human being, as a person. So that's really, really important. So I'm going to take you through 2 or 3 things that you can do in your school that you can think about that might lead to some questions through your senior leadership team, through your governing bodies, through your board, through your departmental meetings, all those type of things, and give you some real kind of clarity on what that is. So just going to share my screen with you right now to begin with, and I'm going to talk you through the Satchel Pulse kind of wellbeing tracker here, and I'm just going to dive into the job satisfaction pillar, which is the one we're going to be looking in today. Which you can see here. I'm just going to scroll down and click on all of the questions. And what this does, it gives you a series of questions and reflection questions really that you can use at various points in your school year with your staff, with your leadership teams, all those type of things. So I'm just going to pick a handful of these to give you a flavour of the type of things that you might want to kind of consider. That it's not rocket science, but it's the things that you maybe forget on a day-to-day basis that need to be brought back to the front of your mind so that you can actually action these. So the first one we've got here is this question on the left-hand side here, where I've got my cursor just hovering around. I see myself as a valuable member of my workplace. Really, really important that to think, well, actually, do our staff really see themselves as a valuable member of the workplace, or are they just a number in a machine? And on the right-hand side here, you've got some things to think about. So a couple of bullet points there that you might want to think about in terms of reflection questions. So do staff members see their role as being important, or is it just a job? And actually, how are the staff valued? How are they shown they are valued? Is this privately or in public forums? And that's really, really interesting. They're just picking that second bullet point apart there. How are they valued? But that second point, how are they shown? So that it's that kind of perception of, is this public, is it private, and do we want to do that in front of people? Is it a one-to-one? And you'll know your staff, you'll know your kind of different circumstances, but it's really interesting to think about those things. Second one down here, I feel like I can trust other adults in the work here. Really interesting. Are staff used to their professional freedom to do their job? Right, so are we kind of micromanaging them, or actually are they given that professional freedom, and are they supported to make the best choices of priorities in their job when appropriate? So are we giving them that kind of professional license to to really be able to make those decisions themselves? I just scroll down a few of these, and there's a lot of questions you can see here. If I just go towards the kind of bottom of the ambers, really interesting one here, that I feel I have a positive working relationship with my colleagues. So actually, are there any staff issues, and are they addressed? What's done to promote the positive relationships when things have gone wrong? Another one down here in the red section now. I feel I'm respected by the students. So actually, what's the culture like in your school? Do staff really feel they're respected, and does that then give them job satisfaction? How are staff treated by the management in the school, and what's done to support high expectations? And actually, if I go down a bit further here as well, I'm happy in my role. You know, are staff members clear about their roles? Do they understand where their role fits into the bigger picture? And how is staff wellbeing? You know, what time is given over to improving staff wellbeing? Such a hot topic at the moment about actually what are we doing to remove some of that workload and actually improve the wellbeing and thinking about, are you giving enough time to that? And I think that's quite interesting to have that as a standing item on your kind of almost your senior leadership meetings, to think about, well, are we doing this, and what are we doing, and what have we done in the last 4 weeks or the last half term or the last term to address this? And if the answer is nothing, then I think this needs to be something that you think about a little bit more rather than just every now and again. Okay, I said I had a couple of strategies for you as well. So I want to kind of go through these with you, and just a brief overview of a couple of things that you can do within your school that might already be happening, or might not, or it might be happening but not very effective, or things that you may not have thought of before. Again, nothing rocket science here, bringing things back to the forefront of your memory, being very, very practical and thinking of things that you can implement the very next day. So first one is career aspiration review meetings. So we talk about job satisfaction and where people want to go to move on to in their careers, but actually how many times do we sit down with people and do this? So first thing, what is it? Well, actually, we know that kind of that first bullet point there, that staff who are fulfilled in their role are more likely to bring more passion to their work. So it's really important that we really, you know, home in on this. But actually, how often do we sit down with people and actually talk about their career aspirations, and not be worried or scared that might be something outside of your organization at some point in the future? But actually, if you can get 3 or 4 great years from them in your organization, and then they move on because they're going to do bigger and better things, that's fine, because you then reinvent that and bring someone else in and you do the same. The worst thing is to have people sat there who really are just there because they're picking their pay up, and they're not engaged and they're not satisfied. You want people to be satisfied and moving on at some point. And an employer should be able to really rely on their employer to be able to do that for them. So having a discussion purely based on what that individual aspires to is really, really important. So it's not just about kind of, you know, what we're doing in your job and what your performance is, but actually, what is it that you want out of this? You know, what satisfies you? What do you really want, and how can we make that better? So what do we need then? Very, very simple, almost an annual meeting between the member of staff, where the key here is the sole focus is on them, not about anything else, but the sole focus is on them. And you also need to make sure that you, in my opinion, prepare and provide the questions to that member of staff in advance of the meeting. The last thing you want is to have a meeting where somebody, you know, throws a question on you and says, so what do you want to do in 5 years' time? And you're sitting there thinking, I haven't really had a chance to think about this. I'm not really sure. Because all that happens is you just get the answer that the line manager wants. Oh, well, I'm really happy here, and I want to stay here, and that might not be the case. So staff need time to think about that, and therefore, given the questions in advance, will make sure that they can have a far better detailed understanding and a deep understanding of where they want to be and how they aspire, you know, how they are, should I say, satisfied in their job, but also what they aspire to. And it also gives them the idea that the line manager or the school or the organization is really thinking about them. And it's not just about their day-to-day kind of what the school want out of them, but it's actually what can the school give to them, which is really important. Things to avoid, really make sure that you avoid the temptation of tagging it onto the end of a meeting and it being the last agenda item, or it just looks like a tag on. It's not really great. Make sure it's a dedicated meeting. It's all about them, and it really demonstrates your importance or the importance you're attaching to it, rather than kind of, oh, right, we've got to the end of our weekly meeting. I just want to ask you one question. What do you want to do in the next few years? It does feel like a tag on. So make it a dedicated meeting where it's all about them. You've supplied the questions in advance. You've wanted to reflect on it, and you are showing your importance of it. Taking it further then, depending on the member of staff. So the first bullet point there, it's thinking about, you might want to do it at different stages of the year. There's no point doing it at the end of the year if then somebody has already basically resigned or is about to kind of look for jobs. You might want to think about strategically placing these meetings at different points in the year to make sure that you can help people through that. Now, whether it's support staff, support staff might only have in your school 2-week or a 4-week notice, so that might be slightly different. Whereas head teachers have to give a term's notice. Other people might have to give kind of half terms notice. So thinking about that and thinking about strategically when you want to have these meetings is really, really crucial. And the second bullet point there is actually making sure that wherever possible that a senior leader or somebody kind of in a position who can act on this actually takes those meetings, because if it's just a regular meeting with their head of department, then it doesn't really show the extra importance of it. By having somebody who's a senior leader or the head teacher or an executive or a trust leader doing those meetings, it demonstrates the importance that your organization is putting into job satisfaction. And it also shows that some of the things that they talk about can actually be actioned by that person, rather than somebody saying, well, I'd love to do that, but unfortunately I can't because I'm just the head of English or the head of maths. How can we kind of make sure that the right people are chairing those meetings? Is ultimately very, very simple, which is having effective staff and how we can kind of get to that point. And what I mean, if I break this down, that the first bullet point talks about we always want effective staff, and we try and solve this puzzle all the time. How can we make people more effective? But we seldom actually ask the staff themselves how they can be more effective in their own roles. And they're the people that know. They're the people that will probably be able to give us the most honest and revealing answers about what would make a difference in their role. So the second bullet point has that very question: what would make you more effective at your job? And it's not being scared to ask that question. Actually, they will probably be able to tell you the things that get in their way, or the barriers or the frustrations. We need to listen to our staff more and then be ready to kind of take action on that. And it needs to be, as the third bullet point says there, a regular conversation throughout the year, not just something that's a tag on like I talked about in the last strategy, but actually it needs to be happening all the time. Almost that kind of, if you break a stick of rock and you've got that thread running all the way through, this needs to be something that runs through all of our conversations. How can we make you more effective? What can we do? Because actually they're the people that do that job. And with the best will in the world, you will try to understand all the roles in your organization, but they will know their role inside out and the frustrations that they have far better than you, especially if you've not done that role yourself. So what do we need to do then? Very, very simple. Ask people, listen to what they say, and take action. Because we can always ask people, but not listen to what they say. We've got to be prepared to listen. So even though we ask it, we've got to listen and actually be comfortable by being uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean? Actually, we need to be kind of at that position to think, well, okay, I want to hear this, and it might not be something I want to hear, but I need to listen. And then we need to take action. If we really mean this, we've got to take action, and we've got to listen, and then hopefully put in place some things that can resolve some of those issues, because there's no point in you sitting there and listening and going, yeah, great, and then not doing anything about it, because that's worse. All right. Once you've done that, that's even worse, because someone will say, well, I told you this 6 months ago, and you've still not done anything. So you need to be ready to try to do whatever you can if you are going to listen to people. What to avoid then? Well, don't promise the world. I know I said we need to take action, but there are some things that actually they might be out of our power. And in that second bullet point, I've said there that there's a tendency to say, oh, don't worry, I'll sort it out, and I'll do this for you, and I'll make it all better for you. But actually, those empty promises, if they become empty, can become quite harmful. And there are certain things that we all know about in education, whether it's government policy or whether it's kind of the national landscape, or there's lots of kind of things that unfortunately we can't resolve and we can't influence overnight. So we need to be fairly honest about that and say, well, I hear what you're saying and I'll try to do everything I can. But there may be some things that you can't resolve, and you can't just say, yes, don't worry. And you can't be that hero leader to everybody. There are certain things in education that we can't influence. However, saying that, there are a lot of things within your school that you can. And we do create the weather in our schools, and we do create that climate. So if there's things in your school that you can resolve, then ultimately you need to make sure you're trying to do that. And lastly, then, how to take it further. A great way to do this is to set up an anonymous way to give feedback, because there's lots of staff that may want to tell you these things, but wouldn't actually sit in front of you and tell you these because they're concerned about where that would go, or that you've said something, or it's going to create like a black mark against their name, or that kind of stuff. So maybe having an anonymous way, like I've said there, a staff room suggestion box. It might be a digital way of doing something, but again, that might be tracked back to their name, so they might be worried about doing that. But how can you kind of create that culture where people will tell you how they can be more effective, and they will tell you their frustrations, and they will tell you the barriers of things that annoy them or make them less effective in their role. So however you get to that point, then you need to get to that. And lastly there, making it a standing agenda item on regular line management meetings. So like I said earlier, that thread through the stick of rock, it's always in there. We're always asking, how can we make you more effective? How can you be more effective in your role? What can we do to support you? What can we do to kind of remove some of the frustrations and barriers that you may be facing? And all the time, having that regular conversation and that regular topic of how we can make you more effective and how you can be more effective is really, really key. Okay, that is, let me just stop sharing my screen now. They were the two strategies I had, and hopefully that will give you just bringing it back to the forefront of your mind again, why it's really important, how you can put some strategies in place, and how that ultimately, if your staff aren't feeling valued, they're not feeling satisfied in their role, then you're not going to be getting the best out of them. That has to be the core of our business in working with people, that if we don't have a happy, engaged, satisfied staff, we're never ever going to be a high performing organization, whether that's a single school, whether that's a multi-academy trust. We've got to make sure that we really have this as an important thread and that we focus on it. Okay, hopefully that's been really useful for you. Hopefully that's given you some things to think about. Yeah, I look forward to maybe seeing you again in some of the webinars that we're going to be doing on the other, well, we've done 2 of these kind of pillars now, but on the other pillars of the of wellbeing that Satchel Pulse have put in place. Thank you.